How people elsewhere imagine Brussels. The more one is familiar with Brussels, the more one is aware of the multi-layered nature of the city. It takes time and energy to unravel its urban complexity. As a social and cultural anthropologist, I have long been interested in the imaginaries that people hold of places, particularly elsewheres that they have never been to, physically speaking. Living in Brussels, I have often wondered how outsiders imagine my city. Having worked in countries as diverse as Indonesia, Tanzania, Chile and the USA, I have had many opportunities to ask people that question, both directly and indirectly. Before analyzing their answers, it is important to specify what we are talking about here. Imaginaries are culturally shared and socially transmitted. They interact with people's personal imaginings and are used as meaning-making and world-shaping devices. Imaginaries are expressed in textual or audiovisual form and circulate either through public or private communication channels. The most common examples include books and magazines, documentaries and movies, news and social media, websites, blogs, and individual messages and communications. Depending on how much people have been exposed to these and other sources of information, their imaginaries of a place range from basic to more refined. Imaginaries become even more interesting to study when they help people decide whether to travel to a place for work or for leisure. Some research has been done on the external image of Brussels as a tourism destination, related to chocolate, fries and beer, the Atomium, the Grand Place and Manneke Pis. But we know much less about how potential migrants imagine Brussels. While the motivations to migrate are multiple, they are linked to the ability of migrants and their social networks to imagine other places and lives. People hardly journey to unknown places, but to destinations they already know, through the imaginaries that circulate about them. In the logics of migration, imaginaries play a predominant role in envisioning the green pastures on the other side. Migration is as much about these imaginaries as it is about the actual physical movement from one locality to another. The images and ideas of other, read better, places to live circulate in a very uneven global space and are filtered through migrants' personal aspirations. Importantly, imaginaries are never simply imposed in a one-way direction, but are appropriated and acted on in terms of co- and counter-imaginaries. Returning to the example of Brussels, the dominant imaginary of the city, held by the elites and the powers that be, has changed over time. The international appearance of Brussels only increased after Belgium was formed as a country in the 19th century. The fact that the capital city is in a small European country sandwiched in between states such as France, Germany and the UK allowed it to profile itself as a neutral ground for power diplomacy. This image was enhanced from the moment Brussels started hosting various seats of the EU, such as the European Commission, the European Council and the Council of the European Union, and became referred to as the capital of Europe. While being a political powerhouse is associated with stodginess and chilliness, this image is counteracted by Brussels' reputation as a creative, culture-loving city, with an eclectic and international arts, design, fashion, dance, theatre and music scene, making some label the city as the new Berlin. While Belgian political structures still try to govern Brussels as a capital where Latin and Germanic cultures meet and sometimes clash, the city has long become hybridized and multicultural. Most people living in Brussels were born elsewhere. Consequently, many people abroad have some direct or indirect connections with Brussels, by knowing people who are living or have lived in the city at some point in time. The globally spreading imaginaries of Brussels are heavily influenced by those connections, much more so than by all the professional imagineering and city branding. The more personal the links are, the more weight the circulating imaginaries carry, particularly when they are connected to a decision to move, either temporarily or more permanently. Interestingly, migration-related imaginaries often tend to stress positive aspects of a destination and neglect negative ones. For one, many migrants tend to over-report their successes and under-report or even completely conceal their failures when communicating with the home front. This is particularly the case for people who are struggling to make ends meet. Positive imaginaries are part of their strategy to survive. Potential migrants, on the other hand, often turn a blind eye towards the negative imaginaries about their destination, as these trouble their dreams of a better future. The grass must be greener on the other side. Others, such as trans migrants, have few imaginaries at all, because they got stuck in Brussels on their way to their imagined greener other side elsewhere, such as the UK. Research among expats, the common name used for so-called highly skilled and economically better off migrants, reveals yet a different picture. In expat networks, negative imaginaries of a destination circulate more easily. And this is not necessarily because expats themselves have been affected by things such as lack of cleanliness, traffic chaos, or administrative mismanagement. It is more related to the fact that they have the resources at their disposal to reverse earlier migration-related decisions. What this also confirms is that various groups in the city, including migrant groups, live in their own bubbles. These bubbles do not necessarily interact much with each other, even if they share the same language, religion, ethnicity, or nationality. In Brussels, for instance, there are bubbles of Polish bureaucrats, Polish construction and domestic workers, and Polish homeless. These groups have different biographies, different links to their country of origin and social networks, and obviously they circulate different imaginaries of Brussels. Going back to the countries where I did research on the imaginaries people there had about Brussels, the findings were nuanced. In Chile, the imaginaries were most concrete, because Brussels hosts a sizable Chilean community, and Chile historically had a small but influential Belgian immigration. In both Tanzania and Indonesia, the imaginaries was much more abstract and related to an imagined West rather than to Brussels in particular. In the USA, finally, the imaginaries about Brussels were really fragmentary, depending on what people had picked up, from associations with European politics to gastronomy and tourism attractions. In sum, there is no straightforward answer to the question how people abroad imagine Brussels. It depends to a great extent on the circulating imaginaries to which they are exposed. Having a better grasp of which imaginaries are circulating where and by whom is as insightful for an understanding of others as it is for better knowing ourselves and our city.